Here I'm going to explain a new programme theory template that we have developed in the Greater Manchester Moving Local Pilot to support the process evaluation. The particular example that I'm going to introduce today relates to active travel, but we've developed programme theory templates that also relate to community engagement and integrating physical activity and health. The purpose of this video is actually just to explain how the template is intended to be used, and we encourage you to look at our process evaluation PowerPoint presentation and the associated portfolio for the examples that bring this area of work within the whole systems approach to physical activity to life. So first of all, I'll start by explaining what do we even mean by a programme theory. The programme theory is an explanation of how actions are intended or assumed to lead to the desired changes that we want to see. And in Greater Manchester, we often use the heuristic if, then, because in order to frame those explanations. And more recently, we've also been including the by or how, which allows us to articulate a little bit more about what the action may entail. One unique aspect of the programme theory that we've been developing in Greater Manchester is our attention to multiple layers of the system. And for those of you that have seen the onion diagram before, you'll recognise some of these titles. But for those of you who are not familiar with that diagram, it really just highlights that we focus on the individual layer and what individuals actually do or think or feel or are capable of. But we also then expands that out to think about the social environment in which individuals find themselves, the organisations and institutions that they interact with or whose interactions have a bearing on what they can or can't do, the physical environment, the policy environment, and really importantly, the cultural norms and ideologies, which really means that what do we think about these topics that may have an influence on how things can change or not. The template starts with thinking about the context, and the context in this case refers to what already exists within the system. And in particular, what we've highlighted here are the contexts that occupy each of those different layers that we may want to change. So just to give a couple of examples, at a cultural level or ideological level, then we might see that there are incompatible ideas about active travel. For example, that some feel that it's important for as many people as possible to travel actively for the purposes of reducing carbon emissions, whereas others may be focusing on how we might get more cars into the centre of town in order to address economic policy. Thinking a bit more tangibly about the actual physical environment, we might see a context where the network of routes and transport providers is fractured and dispersed, and that may place limitations on how easy it is for people to complete a journey using active travel measures. The then column then is there to show what do we actually want, so what would we like to achieve at all of these different layers of society. So thinking about the cultural and ideological level, that we would like to have a shared culture, solidarity around the norms for active travel, that it's usual and it's accepted that is a preferred way to get around Manchester. And the because column gives a high-level explanation of how that state may be changed. So in this case, we would expect there to be a need for altering specific views or frames of reference in order to build that collective identity. And this is a template, as I say, and so we don't expect these changes to happen at all of these different layers of society without some initiatives, some actions and interventions, projects, processes, if you will. And as is common with the systems approach, we really understand that in order to make these changes, the initiatives need to be locally designed. And so this space in the middle here is for groups who are working on active travel across Greater Manchester to articulate their particular programmes that are trying to bring about these changes and to outline their assumptions as to how they think that will happen. But by using a common framework or a template, as you can see here, we hope to be able to look across the different initiatives that are happening all over Greater Manchester, understand where there are commonalities in what people are trying to do, and then be able to interrogate the context in which changes occur or not. So this really is just a very early step in trying to outline a coherent framework by which people can articulate their efforts, and that we as the evaluation team can then understand what contributions those efforts may be making in order to give a more coherent response to what's working to affect changes in the system to allow for active travel, for whom and in what circumstances. So that concludes the introduction to this template, and we hope in future waves to be able to report against progress that the group are making across all of these different layers of society, and how changes in one area may indeed be affecting changes in another.